Our next section is about solving equations. So I'm going to just go straight into several examples so we can work through these, and then we'll practice quite a bit in class tomorrow. So for number 1, we are going to solve this equation. Our goal is to get this x by itself. So we are going to do that by looking at everything that's on the same side of the equation as the x, and pick whatever's furthest from the x on that side, move it over first. So the thing furthest on the left side from that x is the 3. 5 is right next to it, so we're going to move that later. So we will start by moving over our 3. You do that by adding it to both sides. We're going to be left with 5x on the left-hand side. Negative 3 plus 3 is 0, so those cancel out. 12 plus 3 is 15. You make sure you bring down your equal sign, and then we have 5x equals 15. Then the next thing that we need to do is, this is 5 times x, so we're going to divide both sides by 5. That will give us x equals positive 3. So now, number 2 is quite a bit harder because of that fraction. You're still going to start off the same way as you started the previous one, which is to move over the 7 first. If you have something multiplied by an x and something added or subtracted, you always are going to move over whatever is added or subtracted first. So when I move over that 7, I end up getting 2 over 3 times x equals 12. So here comes the challenging part. You need to get rid of that fraction. There are several ways that you can do it. If you are good at these problems and use a different method from me, that's fine. You can keep using it as long as you're getting the same answers. So my way of doing these is to eliminate that fraction by multiplying both sides by the fraction's reciprocal. So I'll even write that down. So we're going to multiply by the reciprocal of 2/3, which is 3 over 2. You also need to make sure that you multiply the other side by that. You can't just go around multiplying one side by 3 over 2. You got to do it to both sides. So now on the left-hand side, I end up with 3 over 2 times 2 over 3. The wonderful thing here is that these 3's cancel, these 2's cancel, and we're actually just left with an x on the left-hand side. That's what our goal was, just to get that x. Right-hand side, we have to use what we know about multiplying fractions. So you can rewrite it as 12 over 1 times 3 over 2. You don't have to rewrite it if you don't want to, if you can do it in your head. From there, you can simplify it by cross-canceling. I'm going to end up getting 6 over 1 times 3 over 1, which gives me an answer of x equals 18. So now we are going to do a word problem. And for this one, I'll show you some methods to help you out with these type of problems. So you're going to start by reading through the problem. Your total cost for a book, including 6% sales tax, is $23.32. We want to find what was the price of the book before tax. So what we're going to do is, I would like you to do 3 steps for these problems when you see a word problem. Your first step is going to be to define a variable. And when I ask you to define a variable, what that means is you need to write out a variable that represents what you're looking for. So I'm going to use the variable b. I'm working with books, I like b. And so now you need to figure out what is it that you don't know and that you're trying to find. So they almost always end these problems with a question. In this case, they ask, what was the price of the book before tax? So what I'm going to do is I'm actually just going to write it exactly like that. B is the book price before tax. You can just restate what the question is asking. So the second step is the hardest one for pretty much everybody, and that is to write an equation. So this is the tough part. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to write a few things I know off on the side. I'm going to take some notes on the problem because otherwise it's just a lot of words. So we know a few things. We know that the total cost was $23.32. We also know that the tax rate was 6%. And we're trying to find the price before tax. So the way that this is going to be set up, I'll write it out in words and then we can write it out using numbers. We want to know, we're going to put in our starting cost. And by starting cost, I mean the price before tax. And we're going to add to that the amount of tax that you pay. This is going to be equal to your total price. So it looks confusing, but I'll go through it step by step. So the first thing that we have is our starting cost. So the starting cost, the cost before tax, we actually don't know that. So we're going to write that down as B. The next part is the place where people tend to make their mistakes. So we're looking for the amount of tax, and we want this to be a dollar amount. So it's not just going to be 6%, it actually is going to be 6%, which is your tax rate, multiplied by your cost before tax. Because whenever you pay tax, it always depends on the amount that the price of the object. So we know that 6% is the same as 0.06. Do not forget that 0 after the decimal point. We also know that in this problem, the cost before tax, notice how that looks very similar to what I have up here, it's actually going to be B. So I'm going to write this as 0.06B. Now the total price, thankfully that one's not too bad. I have it right up there. So I'm going to write that as $23.32. So now we've come to the last step of this problem, which is to solve the equation. So my equation, I have B plus 0.06B equals 23.32. So first thing I need to do is combine my like terms. Remember, this is 1B, so it's going to end up being 1.06B is equal to 23.32. So now, lucky for you, I am actually on this section going to allow you to use a graphing calculator. When you're working in class and on the test or quiz, you can't use your iPad calculator, but if you have a graphing calculator or if you have another handheld calculator that's not on your cell phone, not on your iPad, you can feel free to use it. So you're going to divide both sides by 1.06. When you do that, your final answer is going to be $22. Do not forget to put the dollar sign. So we're going to go back to some more equations, but these ones are going to be a little bit harder. Luckily, though, we are done with the word problems for this video. For number 4, we're going to solve this equation for y. The way that we are going to do it, since we have variables on both sides of the equal sign, is we need to get the variables on one side of the equal sign and get the numbers on the other. The easiest way to approach this problem is to choose whichever variable has the highest coefficient, which means the number in front of it. So in this case, the 13 is the highest coefficient, and subtract the 8y from that 13y. When we do that, 8y minus 8y is 0, so those cancel out. We end up getting negative 16 equals 5y, and then you bring down the plus 9. We also need to move over that 9. which gives us negative 25 equals 5y. From there, we're going to divide both sides by 5, which gives us y equals negative 5. So now, number 5 is quite a bit more complicated, and when you're solving equations and you see parentheses, oftentimes that is a sign that you need to use the distributive property. So in this problem, we're going to start by distributing everything that we can. By the way, do not distribute that 4 to the 5. The 5x is not in the parentheses. Also with this 3, make sure you also distribute the negative. So on the left-hand side, we're going to get 8x minus 36 plus 5x. Right-hand side, we get negative 30 plus 3x. So we're going to keep going. We have one more step to do before we can move the variables to one side. That one step is to combine any like terms that we have. So we're going to start by distributing. Now we are going to combine like terms. And in this case, my 8x and my 5x are my like terms. Those are going to give me 13x. So then I'm left with 13x minus 36 equals negative 30 plus 3x. So from here, I'm going to do the exact same type of problem as the one I had in 4. I'm going to get the variables on one side, the numbers on the other, and then solve. So I'm going to move over this 3x. I'm going to actually move over the 36 on the same step. And that's going to give me 10x equals 6. So from there, I have to divide both sides by 10. You might notice that 10 does not go into 6 evenly, so we get x is 6 over 10. Do not forget to reduce. My answer will be x equals 3 over 5. So my last problem of the day is really complicated looking. It looks terrible, and actually it is pretty terrible, but I have a little trick that might help you out with this type of fraction problem. So my first goal on these problems is to get rid of the fraction. It will make your life a lot more simple. So what you're going to do is you are going to figure out the least common denominator. In this case, I have denominators of 2 and 3, so my least common denominator is going to be 6. Then I'm going to multiply everything in that equation by 6. And I'll show you what happens when I do that. So start with this one. So 1/2 times 6 is actually just going to give me 3. So I get 3x. 4 times 6 gives me 24. Negative 2/3 x times 6. If you cannot do that in your head, feel free to write it on the side. And you will find that you will get negative 4 times x. Again, 1/2 times 6 gives me 3. Suddenly, I have a nice problem that has no fractions in it. Now you can solve it just like you were solving the previous problems. I'm going to put my numbers on one side and put my variables on the other. My 4x has a negative, and so when you have a negative, it's always a good idea to get rid of that negative by adding it to both sides, which gives me a 7x for the variables. I'm also going to subtract the 24 on this step. That's going to give me 7x equals negative 21. My final step is to divide both sides by 7, which gives me an answer of x equals negative 3.